Now I'm going to turn it over to Iain.
Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It's really great to be able to join with all of you today to kind of go over this. So yes, I was tasked by the CLC to try to compile a baseline guide for composers in Canada and internationally who are trying to figure out how to license out their compositions. So the first thing that we really wanted to dive into are the two main types of licensing that I looked into through this report. If I can, this is gonna change, there we go. All right, so the first one is mechanical license. So for those of you who don't know what a mechanical license is, it grants the licensee permission to attach or record a composition onto a physical entity and the right to duplicate and distribute that entity. So you can think of things like CDs, records, cassette tapes, that type of thing. And what's really great about this type of licensing is that we have industry standards already set out. So if you're doing this on your own, there are so many resources that you can refer to. So for example, SOCAN, their standards 9.6 cents per work per copy manufactured. So for every single unit, for every single composition, there's going to be a set standard to stick to. CMRRA also has a standard, and that's 8.3 cents per work, with, of course, some additional modifications depending on the length of the work. These standards are widely accepted and enforced. So what's really important is that if you are licensing your own compositions independently, is to stick to these standards, to stick to these agreements, to inform your negotiations. Please do not undercut these standards, because that could potentially lead to ramifications down the line when you're trying to license in the future. For example, if you're collaborating with somebody who is licensing from you and you gave them a huge discount, the next time they might want that same discount, and in the long run that might not be sustainable. So please respect the value of your work, respect the value of the work of other composers, and just stick to these standards that have been set out and cemented in the industry. Where we get to a little bit of challenges is with sync licensing.
Before we get to sync licenses, one thing I'd like to mention about the mechanicals is the 5 minutes limit applies also to SOCAN's rate. And the fee per extra minute is essentially equivalent to 1 minute of the initial fee. So if you take 20% of the initial fee, you apply that extra 20% for each additional minutes, will give you the fee for longer composition.
Thank you, Simon. All right, so now jumping into the sync licensing. So for sync licensing, there is no, unfortunately, industry standard, which is a huge part of the initiative, of this initiative, was to try and start that conversation of trying to set something that made sense across the industry. So to not keep you in suspense, coming up with a standard for this was basically impossible. It's a highly subjective rate, and we'll get into that in a little bit as to why it's so challenging and how you can navigate this field when you're trying to give out sync licenses for your works, to make that process a lot easier and a little more streamlined for you. So a sync license is essentially combined. Oh, I'm just going to clear this off my screen. It's a license to use a track of music for an audiovisual project. So that is such a range of things. So that could be online streaming, video games, movie soundtracks. I think Netflix, Amazon, or Prime Video, that type of streaming, where there's no physical unit attached to it. It does not grant the authority to use the master recording, but gives the licensee the right to access the documents for the composition. So as you can see on the screen, the sheet music, the lyrics, if they're applicable, not so much here, to then make new recordings of the composition and then combine it with to make an audiovisual project. So as you can see, there's some more examples. So commercials, recording of concerts uploaded to the internet. So when small concerts, they record their holiday performances at the end of the year and then want to upload it to their YouTube channel. This is where this license will apply.
Could also apply to corporate videos, any video that uses music. If the music is not composed specifically for the video, then it requires a sync license.
Yes, yeah, it's a very broad category of the license, and because it covers so many situations and instances, that's what makes it so challenging to apply a standardized rate.
And I don't want to make things overcomplicated, but more and more publishers are considering the use of music in products like podcast as the same category as a sync license, even though it's audio only. Like the idea of using a musical work into another production in general is more and more included in or processed or handled by the same team as the sync teams by publishers. So
Wow,
it's getting broader.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of makes sense because there's a lot of podcasts now, especially where they'll have a video version that they'll upload to YouTube, and then just the recording that'll be uploaded to something like Spotify.
Yep, that's right.
So that's wow, that's good. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's great for that, but when we're on this side of the table, it's a little bit more challenging when this is your income, this is your profession, and this is your work and copyrights. So how to go about this? Really, there's two main methods of assigning sync licenses. So the two main ones are DIY licensing. We're going to spend a lot of time on this to make sure it's, again, as streamlined as possible for anybody here or who anybody who's going to watch and refer to this presentation in the future, and sync houses. So if we're just going to look at a side-by-side between the two, so DIY licensing, it's when you're doing it on your own. You are the composer, you're the negotiator, and you are the business person who's dealing with another party who would like to purchase the sync license to use your composition. Some things to keep in mind if this is an intimidating idea for you is you hold the rights. These are your rights. This is your composition. The power is in your hands. Please don't give low or receive lowball or accept lowball offers that may reduce the value of your work and the work of other composers. If you are offered a rate that you're not comfortable accepting, just don't accept it. It might not feel great in the short run, but in the long run, if you're upholding the value of your work and the work of other composers, that's going to lead to a much richer and hopefully lucrative experience for you in this field. When you are negotiating these deals and contracts and offers, be mindful to ensure that it's not a buyout of your rights for the composition. You want to make sure that there are limits placed onto it, and we will get into that and the scope of a license and all that shortly. And the other thing is make sure that the payment structure suits your needs. We're going to go through some payment structures just after this slide, I believe, on when things are being paid, how much, what percentage, when and where, and all that good stuff. And you have to make sure that really, at the end of the day, it's something you're comfortable with and you're comfortable enforcing. Because if you're doing this on your own independently, that responsibility will rest on your shoulders. Like I said today, we're going to try and help you figure out some ways to make that easier and more manageable for yourself. On the other side,
a couple notes on this one, Iain. Low fees, users or producers will usually use the argument of this is going to be good promotion for you. Good promotion in 2023 does not necessarily has the value it had in the previous years. We can instinctively think of the Kate Bush example in Stranger Things, where she had the song placed in the TV show, and then she rocked the #1 on Billboard for a few months later on. But this is really a rare exception. So, I mean, if promotion means having a couple thousands of plays on Spotify, it is definitely not worth money-wise the upfront fee that you could have negotiated. It's always good to have more plays. It's always good to have visibility, but usually it does not has the same value. It does not have the same value as the upfront fee that you could possibly negotiate. And about the buyout of your rights, we will see, as Iain said, some limits you can have to an agreement, but it is also important that you are still entitled to royalties paid by other users to PROs. So this is what buyout means. So if you sign a buyout, it may mean that you won't get any royalties from SOCAN when the TV show is played on TV, for example. So it is very important to have at least one article saying that you reserve your rights to get more royalties, or royalties paid by the broadcasters and not necessarily the producer only.
I'm just going
Oh, yeah.
jump in
Go for it.
here because we have a question. Since we're on the topic of royalties, we have a question from Maria. Can you explain what some libraries mean by royalty free? Since royalties are paid by the broadcaster to the PRO, what advantage is there to non-broadcaster clients licensing a royalty free piece of music, and how does this affect the composer?
Mm-hmm. Most royalty-free libraries I saw it's really a marketing advantage, meaning that the producers that will use the music, they won't pay an upfront fee, but it's what we call a cue sheet business. So when you buy or subscribe or download some royalty-free music, it will come with an agreement. And in this agreement, it will say that you are entitled to use the music for free in your production, but you still have to include the information in your cue sheet, and broadcasters will pay the PROs, as you mentioned in the question, and publishers and composers will still get royalties from the broadcasters via their respective PRO. But royalty free usually means that there is no upfront fee.
All right, I think we're all good here. We can probably shift over to the sync house. So before starting this initiative, I'd never heard of a sync house before, ever. So like, what is this? So essentially, so it's a sync or it's a music house, and it's a third-party business that will try to place works that are oh my goodness, what's the word? Registered with it into third-party projects. So for example, if you were to register one of your compositions with a sync house, there's music publishers who work there, and they will actively be seeking placements for that work in commercials or in movies or in things like that. So what this does is this provides you with an entire team, sometimes, of people actively trying to place your work. The sync house, there's a lot of variety between each and every sync house. They all have slightly different models when it comes to compensation, registration, and where their strengths are in placements. So some will have, a coverall fee that you would pay to them for their time. And in other cases, you pay per composition. So as you register, there's a small registration fee that you would pay to the sync house, and then they will work to place that composition. the major pros of a sync house really include the information that you'll be getting back from them. If you are successful through them in having your compositions placed, you will know where and in what areas of media are your compositions really flourishing in. So for example, are you securing a lot of video game overtures, opportunities? Or commercials, do those seem to be where your pieces are really thriving? Because then on your own, you can start to target those areas and fields. Of course, when you are registering your piece with a sync house, there's no guarantee that your compositions will be placed. Of course, again, this is their business as well. They'll actively be pushing for it, but there is no guarantee on that. Simon, do you have anything to add just here on this?
Not necessarily. I think you had a great explanation of how these work. Some are very proactive, some are more on an administration side of business.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the important thing to remember is that there's no guarantee.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. And one thing though that is really important, and if anyone here or anyone watching this decides to pursue working with the sync house, you have a lot of options because their terms of service vary little by little between one. You can really find ones that fit your needs and your wants. What is really important, and Simon is actually the one who brought this up to me when we were discussing this a while ago, is when possible to have non-exclusive agreements with the sync house. So essentially when you register a piece with them or composition with them, to make sure that that does not block you from placing it on your own or through another party. So an example where this could be frustrating down the line is, so let's say they have they have an exclusive agreement with you, and one of your colleague says, "Hi, I'd love to use your composition in this project I'm working on. Can you give me a sync license for it?" At that point, you wouldn't be able to say yes. You'd have to direct them to the sync house, which kind of, it takes you off of the full control of it, and it just makes an extra step. So when possible, non-exclusive agreements really are the way to go, because you want to retain as much control over your work as you can, or at least as much as you'd like to. All right, and I think we can hop on. So when we're talking about DIY licensing, there's three things, well, all sync licensing in general, but it's something to really pay attention to if you're doing this independently. So the three main aspects are the license term, the license territory, and the scope or the purpose. So all of these will have an impact on the rates that are being set in any negotiation. So when we're talking about the license term, is how long will the license be valid? Is it for something that's very short term? Is it for a year, a decade, or is it in perpetuity? So there is no end to it. And when does it become valid? Does it become valid as soon as your signature's on the paper? Does it become valid in 3 months from now? And when does it expire, if it expires? So those are things to really keep in mind. The next is the license territory. So where will this license apply? So if you have granted a license for use in Canada only, and this project is being showcased at international film festivals, let's say in Paris or something, the license doesn't cover that. So that's why you want to make sure that where this license will be valid, that should be specific, especially when it comes to the internet, because the internet it's the internet. It's very difficult to put limiters on that. So if that's a component of it, and there's a chance that it's just going to be spreading, which can be great or not so great, depending on your perspective, you want to make sure that's included and accounted for in a licensing agreement. The final piece is the scope or the purpose. And this one out of the three is the most subjective. And this is where the wiggle room of a sync license really, I think, is highlighted. It's to what capacity the composition will be used in whatever audiovisual project it's going to be used in. So on the note of a podcast, for example, maybe they're using just a short bit of it for, the introduction music, right? It's just a little something, which would be totally different in scope from we're watching a movie on Netflix and your composition's playing at the party at the end, and then it crescendos and then the credits play. That's a much more significant purpose, because that's what people are going to take away from that audiovisual project. So this is where a lot of your bargaining power comes in. Make sure you understand how it's going to be used, to what extent in this audiovisual project, and ensure that you are comfortable with the compensation being offered for how it's going to be used. Simon, do you have anything to add to any of these three components?
I totally agree with you. This is exactly where all the negotiation takes part. So licensing term, the longer the license, the higher the fee. Same for the territory. And always keep in mind that it can be as simple as everywhere in the world for perpetuity, which is a high fee, but it can also be a bit more complicated. So, for example, if an independent feature film is being produced in Canada, they might want to clear the rights for Canada for many media, so TV, video on demand, internet, for Canada only, but they might want to distribute the film in film festivals throughout the world. So it can be like on a multiple layers of rights. So it could be, let's say, 10 years in Canada for some of the rights, but we would also like to distribute in film festivals throughout the world for 2 years. So this is a lot of negotiation can be there. However, one thing to keep in mind, is that these terms and territories are often decided by the distributor. So sometimes the producer of the film may say, well, I have an agreement with my distributor and they ask me to distribute around the world, even though it's a French language feature film. And we all know that a French language film might not be very popular in the States or in South America, but the distributor asks for a license for the world. So these are all negotiation points. And when it comes to scope and purpose, what I like to think of is what value of the song has in the scene. So, for example, in a bar, a song plays in the background. Can it be replaced by any other songs? If so, then the value might not be that high, because if you ask for a too high fee, they may have so many other options. But if the comedian dances on the composition and it's a specific rhythm, that it's a high pace composition, because this is the energy and the emotion they want to show in this particular scene, then maybe there are much less options for them. So you have to keep in mind of the link between the composition that's used and the scene or the script or the story at that particular moment in the production.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Yeah, that's really well said. Really well said. You're awesome. All right, you can probably go to the next piece. All right, so this again is something that should really be stressed, especially when negotiating this sync licenses on your own. It's when you're getting paid, when you are getting compensated for the license. I had conducted several interviews to kind of get a sense of how this worked with Canadian composers, and there seem to be three main methods of fee payments. So the first one, which is a single upfront fee. Oh, and I would also like to say this does not including any back-end royalties from any PROs. That is totally separate. This is strictly between you, the composer, and the party who's licensing. So it's just you two entities together. So the first one is a single upfront fee. This across the board was the most desirable because it's a one and done. You have the rate set out and you're paid immediately. And after that, really all you need to worry about is making sure that the scope of the license is enforced. You don't have to be chasing anybody to get paid for your work. I know Carfax has a great a little slogan of "Has the artist been paid?" This is the best method, the most efficient method for that. The next one is very similar to the first one, which is a reduced upfront fee and then some back-end payments. So very similarly, there'll be a larger sum at the beginning, probably right upon signing, and then some payments later. For this, we strongly recommend that the dates of when those back-end payments will be done is set out at the get-go. So there's no chasing, and they know when the payment should be made by. And you should also know how many. So for example, okay, well, you'll pay the upfront fee now, and in 6 months, you'll pay the next, and then 6 months after that, you'll pay the next one. And then that's it. It's a lot easier to stay on top of to get paid. And yeah, I mean, that pretty much is that one. The next one is included on here just to show that this is an option, but this is not an option that I recommend anybody follows under any circumstances. So in this case, there's no upfront fee and it's all back-end payments. This is the least desirable option because as a composer, you are not getting paid when the license becomes active and enforceable. You're still waiting, and it becomes harder to chase people down to make sure you're being compensated for your work and for your time and for the license. And because of this, it's easier for people to avoid paying you. And even if eventually they do pay you, you're not getting paid when you should be getting paid when the license is active. Simon, do you have anything to just add to this? I think we're talking a little bit more about it on the next slide, but anything here that you really want to?
Yeah, for sure. Option one is the go-to, always. I mean, the reason for this is because especially if you're going on a DIY option, is that what are the control you have? What is the control you have? What if in 3 months you hear about the movie in news and they win awards across festivals everywhere, but they never reply to you? Like, unless you want to engage lawyer fees to be able to get paid, it can get very, very difficult to be able to obtain any negotiated fee. For the second option, reduced upfront fee and backend payment, one very good thing to know is that there can be options negotiated in a sync license. So if I go back to my independent feature film example, you could say that all right, we'll agree to a fee for Canadian broadcasts, but if ever you sell internet with an international distributor, let's right away figure out a fee that you'll pay on extra if ever it goes outside Canada. So these are options that you can already put in the agreement. And since you've already paid once, you have a much better link, or like the good faith of the producer is enforced there, and you can be reassured a little bit, at least, that if the feature film goes internationally, you will indeed get paid for your option. So this is the way I would go with the second option, with the back-end payments. But definitely single upfront fee is the way to go. And if you are thinking of agreeing on a lower fee or no upfront fee, I would definitely recommend to have a very low fee. Let's say you know the director that wants to use your music, and they really tell you, look, I have no money. Well, why not agreeing to a symbolic fee of, I don't know, $50, $75, $100 instead of no fee at all? So at least you're having the principle of you're getting paid something for your work instead of being it for free, and you don't set a precedent. So next time this director wants to use anybody else's music, they will know that it's worth something at least.
Mhm.
That would be my suggestion. But again, I know I'm repeating myself, but single upfront fee is always the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. All right. So this is for let's just as best practices and some legal resources is, regardless of the profession or the field, it's imperative to secure a license for another person's composition or the use of it. Failure to comply with this and infringing on another person's copyrights may result in legal ramifications. These are serious ramifications. So when you are maybe collaborating or just working in this industry, also just be aware, to not be doing this yourself. But for anybody who is not necessarily a composer and is watching this and is looking to secure the use of a composition for your work, please keep this in mind. Yeah, I think this slide really speaks for itself. If you're unsure whether or not you need a license for a project, contact a PRO. This is what they're here for. They're here to answer these questions. Many PROs have a list of resources like what's the word, like common questions and answers. What is that? FAQs.
Yeah, FAQs.
FAQs.
Yeah.
Those exist, and they're here for a reason. And people put their time into developing those. And if your question's not answered there, send an email. People are generally very friendly at PROs. They're here to do the work, to be the support. Yeah, that's really it. So this to all the composers is the enforcement of intellectual property rights is the responsibility of the rights holder, unless you've deferred that to a third party and given them authority to do it upon your behalf. It's on your shoulders to make sure that if you suspect your copyrights are being infringed upon, you take action against it. Obviously, legal fees can get expensive. So I'd recommend just kind of sussing the situation out on your own first, really getting a sense of it. And if you have a reasonable sense that your rights are being infringed upon, then do contact a lawyer. I believe some PROs have some legal clinics. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Maybe some of them, yeah, or
Yeah.
at least they may refer you to some legal advisors.
Mhm.
But one thing I'd like to add is, yes, a lawyer is a good thing, but sometimes just emailing the production company saying, hey, I see that you've used my composition and you didn't get my permission, I haven't been paid for it. And sometimes it's much easier than we think to settle the situation without a lawyer. It's incredible how many producers contacts us at SOCAN saying, hey, I want to contact this person, this rights holder. I've been trying to email, to call them, no answers. And sometimes when the composer pops up, they are more than happy to compensate you for your work. It's only that they didn't have maybe the proper route to get to you, or sometimes they are too busy when it comes to, let's say, variety shows on TV. I mean, it's sometimes they have a couple of days to clear all the music. So it's not that they don't have the money, it's not that they don't want to, but sometimes the resources to research all the rights holders can be a bit restrained. So yeah, before engaging lawyer fees, at least try to make a few steps on your own, and sometimes you'd be surprised.
That's great advice, Simon. I mean, I'm just a little bit biased, probably. I'm probably just a little bit biased. All right, I think. Yeah, so I think now we can kind of open up the floor to everybody. I'll stop sharing my screen, I think, for now.
I already saw a question
Yeah.
about maybe a list of directory of sync houses or agencies. I'm not aware of any directories per se, but I know that in the reports that Iain put together at the end, there is quite an extensive list of different options that you can look for. And also, if you subscribe to like music news outlets like Digital Music News or Music Business Worldwide, they're often advertising in these types of outlets. So
Yeah.
this can be a good resource for you as well.
Yeah. And by no means is the list in the report comprehensive. And like I said, there's so many options with sync houses. So really, if you just go on Google and you just look up sync houses, you're going to get what seems like an endless list to go through. And then if you're curious about them, you can email them, ask them more specifically about how they structure their business in terms of registering things, payments, etc., and that type of stuff.
Make sure to read the fine prints.
Yes, yes. Take your time. Take your time reading the fine print. Absolutely.
Sometimes even when if you distribute your music on your own, if you sign up with CD Baby or TuneCore, they sometimes even offer this type of service.
We did have two questions from people who submitted online. But Moshe, do you have a question? Is that why you've come in with the video?
No, I just thought I'd show my face.
Oh,
Thank you.
Because I recognize a couple of names here on the participants, but I did write you a question, which I don't know. It has not to do specifically with sync licenses, as you've been talking about today, but I'm kind of confused now between the different options of mechanical rights collections. Now, maybe it's not part of the topic today, so tell me, but I asked the question, like, what is the difference really between AUDIAM and SOCAN reproduction rights, like SOCAN RR? There's just all these proliferation of different rights and digital distribution and a whole bunch of minutia. I tried to keep up on it all my career, but I would like to have, if you don't mind, explanation of the difference between AUDIAM and SOCAN reproduction rights.
Sure. I'm actually the team lead in licensing for SOCAN RR, so I know very well what you're talking about. So specifically, the difference between AUDIAM and SOCAN RR. AUDIAM is in the United States and collects mechanicals for digital audio visuals only. So it's like, let's say your music is on YouTube or other digital services. So it won't collect royalties if you sell CDs in the States, for example. So one thing to keep in mind on a more general basis, mechanical licenses are usually territory based. So if you print a CD in Canada, you'll pay your royalties in Canada. If you print in France, the royalties will be paid to SDRM in France. So it's very territorial. So AUDIAM operates in the States. SOCAN RR, if you become a member of SOCAN reproduction rights for the world, AUDIAM or HFA in the States will collect royalties and will send them to SOCAN RR and will pay you back. So it's same thing as broadcast royalties, if we could say. Like, let's say your a TV show or radio plays in France, they pay SACEM, SACEM pays SOCAN, you still get your money. So it's essentially the same thing, even with the MLC. So SOCAN RR is in relation with the MLC as well in the States. So all our repertoire or catalog is being uploaded to the MLC so they can pay us on a monthly basis as well.
Right. And I guess this is something else. Maybe I'm getting into the weeds of my own issues, but I was asked by SOCAN RR, which I did sign up with, to give a list of those things that I wanted mechanical rights to. And what confused me is that I assumed that my entire catalog would be okay for that list. So I started to make lists and stuff like that, but I forgot her name, Gautier, I forgot her name exactly. I didn't get an answer. Like, how much do I have to actually get into the weeds and list every single piece in my catalog for SOCAN RR to administer?
For each of the musical works you're talking about?
Yes.
If you have a full catalog, the better, the more information we have, the better. If all your catalog is already properly registered to SOCAN, you will have access to it. So
Okay.
you can just say, use my full SOCAN catalog, and we'll have access to it, no problem.
Okay. Thank you very much, Simon. Merci beaucoup.
Pleasure.
So we have a question here from Abigail. I'll read it out just for the purposes of folks who aren't staring at the chat, but I think this is a good one. I'm composer in residence with an orchestra, and we broadcast a concert video for 2 weeks after the concert, accessible to online ticket buyers only. A number of composers have asked my orchestra for use of the concert video in lieu of a sync fee. What do you think of this?
Not sure what you mean by in lieu of a sync fee, but the general answer is this: sync fees applies to this for sure.
Yeah.
One thing to make a difference between, though, is there's a fee for the composition. So well, I would have said lyrics and composition, in this case composition only, but there's also a fee for the performance paid to the orchestra. So the orchestra performs the composition. But yeah, technically there should be at least a small fee or something. At least you be aware of, and you are agreeing that the orchestra yeah, so the orchestra has rented the music and paid the SOCAN fees. Yeah, but since it's recorded, so the SOCAN fees are for performance, when it's live only, when the music is played to the public. As soon as the video is recorded, then the music is used on the recorded video, and there should be a sync fee as well that's paid or negotiated. When it only 2 weeks for the ticket buyers only, it may be a very limited license, and may be a smaller fee, but it should be part of the negotiation for sure.
Okay, that was a good one. I have a pre-submitted question here that I'm going to go to on my other screen here. In seeking a sync license for a published piece of music, for example, a choral work published by Cypress Choral, which my choir performed in December, and would now like to post the video on YouTube for free viewing, who do I approach to obtain the sync license? The composer, the publisher, or SOCAN? And for clarity, I'm just going to copy this into the chat.
Answer is publisher, always. So the first people to contact are the publishers. When you sign a publishing agreement, you grant all the rights to the publisher in exchange of a percentage of the fee of the money or revenues they'll make with your composition. So this means that the publisher will be able to grant you a license for 100% of the copyright, and they will deal with the composer. So they will have to ask them the permission, and they will share the revenues with the composers according to the agreement they have together. If the publisher signed up with SOCAN RR and wants us to administrate, or us meaning SOCAN RR, to administrate the sync fees, they will most likely send us the request and we'll take it from there. But the publisher is 95% of the time the entity to go to first.
There we go. That sounds like you perfectly answered the question. Excellent. Okay, so I don't have any more that were pre-submitted. Does anyone, you can either pop it in the chat or pop your video on or do that little hand raising icon thingamabob, but does anyone else have questions that they want answers to from either Iain or Simon?
If anything was unclear or you'd like it to be gone over again quickly, that's also totally okay. Please just let us know.
Or you can refer to the report. I read Iain's report, and it's very well written, very well explained and detailed. So on the composition.org website, it's available there. It's a very good work.
Yeah, we've got, when you click on it, there's, because it's 10 pages and it's a good, it's actually, I would recommend everyone read it in full, but we do have kind of a quick and dirty summary as well if you just need to grab a quick bit of information. That said, I'm not seeing any more questions. So I think we can probably start to wrap up. I'd like to thank both Simon and Iain for, well, Iain, firstly, for his work on the report itself, which Simon says is in-depth, covers most of the major issues. Again, I highly recommend everyone read it, and also like to thank Simon for joining us today. Oh, okay. Oh, we've got a question. What sort of paperwork should you have in place with the performers of your work if you plan to license the work in the future, aka to film?
These are usually two separate rights. So the performer will handle on their own, and you as the composer or your publisher, if you have one, will handle the publishing side on their own. There's no paperwork except for the mechanical license. If the performer wants to release your music on their products, they should have a mechanical license for physical formats, of course. Other than that, good communication. So to make sure that there is no misunderstanding, and to make sure that you as a publisher or as a composer are available to license your work. I too often see the case of, usually when it comes to cover versions, so an upcoming performer goes on a morning show and wants to perform their new cover song, but they covered I'm going to go to the extreme here, but they cover Beatles songs or Rolling Stones songs. And these are very hard to license when it comes to sync on the publishing side. So my best advice on this is have a good communication and make sure that if they are asked to clear their performance rights, make sure that they contact you and you are always available to clear on the publishing sides of rights also.
That was a good question. This is from Stacy, I believe. Sorry, I missed the beginning, but was there any discussion of resources where you can research the range of fees when you're negotiating your own sync rights classical concert that would be broadcast on TV? Thanks for all. So this is sort of, I mean, I'll throw it to you guys, but this is sort of back to the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
So the best answer I can have for this is, well, there's the easier one, which is really just talking to your colleagues in the field and seeing what their experience has been. The other one where you can possibly get this type of information more specifically is if you do register your compositions with a sync house and it gets placed. Because when it's placed, you get to thumbs it up. You get to thumbs up the agreement at the end of the day, and you will get to see the value that, for example, an indie film has placed in collaboration with the sync house onto that specific composition. So you can start to get, I guess, a financial feel of where the value is currently being placed. And then you can start using that information to negotiate on the side.
So there's no standard really. I've seen anything from $50,000 to $100,000. So there is no standard, unfortunately.
Okay. Two questions coming in here from Maria. I've heard of work for hire contracts with musicians to ensure that the composer can license the work unfettered. Is this standard?
Work for hire Yes, it's a thing for sure. But this means you'll be working as an employee, basically. So if you are hired by a music library, for example, to compose music 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and anything you compose, it's their music because you are paid a salary to compose. So that would be a work for hire. So yes, it's possible. Is it a standard? I don't think so. Maybe if it's on a regular basis. But if you are hired to do one composition as a work for hire, the salary should be negotiated very well in that case, I suggest.
I think also part of the question here is about basically when you hire musicians to record your stuff, is there like I guess a boilerplate contract that exists that is basically just like has the performer, and Maria, you can jump in if I'm misunderstanding, but basically has a boilerplate contract that the performer in signing that is agreeing to allow the composer to license the music out?
I would refer that to the Federation of Musicians.
Oh, hi, Maria. Yeah, that would be my.
Hi, thanks for answering the question. Yeah, I've heard of composers who have done albums and they have an eye to licensing it. And they've had a work for hire contract signed by the musicians, because obviously after the fact, to come back to them and say, hey, I want to use this, I want to license this to a film. It's always more complicated to negotiate things after the fact, right? You want to get that all kind of ironed out at the front end. So I've heard of people presenting the musicians with work for hire contracts, basically saying this is the money that you're being paid and there's nothing further after this, and you agree that, you know, this piece could be licensed. And of course they get the performer share of, you know, through MROC or Artisti, etc. So that's what I'm wondering about. Like, how do you get all that paper? How do you get that all kind of sorted out beforehand so that you don't run into hurdles later?
This is a question that relates to the producing or the labels, almost, I would say. So if you are producing your own album and you are hiring musicians, I'm not familiar, unfortunately, with the exact type of agreements that you can have with them. But again, if they are members of the Federation of Musicians, they probably have a lot of resources for you on that point.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
The TMA would also be a place to check out for that. They're quite helpful, and they've always got staff kicking around. Moshe has another question.
Yeah, it's not a question. I just wanted to weigh in on what Maria was talking about, what you were just talking about. I have done a lot of recordings with musicians that I have hired, and it was basically a contract in place. You can get these contracts from the AFM as well. And the understanding is that they're paid a professional fee for recording, and that's it, you know? In other words, you own the master, and it's that recording that they will then go and license. So I believe that unless it makes so much money that it's inconsiderate after the fact, that basically that you just paid a professional fee if it makes millions of dollars, for example. But other than that, as far as I understand and as far as I've practiced my whole career, you pay the musicians properly in accordance with AFM guidelines, and you own the master and you can license it as you wish because you're the owner of it. You are the label, if that's what you're thinking of, Maria. That's what I wanted to say. And if I'm incorrect, you could correct me.
Thank you for that. I think that actually does sound about right.
Thank you, Moshe. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. Now, for those of us who might want to have these contracts, where would we get them if we're not members of the AFM?
You don't have to be a member of the AFM, Maria. You just get in touch with them, your local AFM or wherever the musicians are more or less from, and they will guide you as far as, and there are different levels. Like there's a professional level for commercial type of recording, and then there's a basic level for what's called limited release. There's a bunch of things. It gets a little bit in the weeds, but they will basically give you the 9 yards.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jim.
Excellent. Okay, and I think that's probably about it. Did we cover this? Is there a big difference in fees between a concert that is being broadcast and music that is, quote, placed?
So that's very circumstantial for the answer, which I'm sure is not what's being asked here. But you could look at it this way. So, for example, you have this concert that's being broadcast, and let's say you did that independently. And for the same concert, it was placed through a sync house, because the placement is really just finding a place where it's going to be licensed out with the sync license. So it could be placed in the same situation. So really there's no difference. The only difference here really is if a sync house placed it, they would have some type of fee off of what would be paid to you. I hope that answers your question, but really that's just going to come down to what the medium is.
Great. So I will circle back to when I was starting to wrap things up, but that was good. I think we had some good questions there, and some good members helping members, which is always good. So yeah, I'll just reiterate a big thank you to Iain for the report. It's fantastic work. Everyone should go check it out. Big thank you to Simon for joining us and giving us his expertise and his time on a Saturday to answer questions and sort of provide sort of expert advice, as I would call it. Not that Iain's not an expert, but you guys know what I mean. And thank you to everyone for joining us. This is being recorded and will be available online if you need to circle back if you have any questions. And of course, if you do have questions, issues that come up, you can always email me, generalmanager@composition.org, and I will either answer your question or I will put you in touch with someone who can. And so on that note, I think we can wrap up. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Happy shoveling for those who have a lot of snow.
We've had no sunlight in Toronto since January, and we have no snow, and it's terrible. So
Okay.
there's no shoveling though.
No,
Right.
that's good.